Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Paquin. Welcome to EWTN Live. We're bringing you guests from around the world. And we've got a great show for you tonight. We're talking about the beauty, truth, and goodness of the Catholic faith with Father Robert Altier. But before he joins us, I want to welcome the Education and Outreach Director for the Knights of Columbus Museum, Mr. Peter Sonsky. And he's here to tell us about Catholic saints, specifically the patron saint of priests, the Curé d'Ars, Saint Jean-Marie Vianney. Peter, welcome. Good to have you here.
Joy to be here, Father Mitch.
Good to have you. And you're not just here to talk about Saint Jean Vianney, but you brought the relic of his heart.
This is his entire incorrupt heart from the shrine at Ars, France.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I remember we had a show just on that, and the heart indicates that he'd had a heart attack at an earlier point in his life, that the scar tissue had healed up. But yeah, this the entire heart and hasn't decayed.
No.
And he is now the patron saint of priests.
He is. He was named so at his canonization, and the Knights of Columbus have asked the Shrine at Ars if this incorrupt heart of St. John Vianney could come to the United States.
Yes.
So they will lead it on pilgrimage throughout the country to pray for priests, to pray for bishops, to pray for renewal and holiness.
I know this is extremely important. We really want to invite all of our viewers to go to these different exhibitions of this relic of the heart of the patron saint of priests, of all priests. It'll be in the United States from now through early June of 2019, correct?
That's correct.
And they can get more information about the journey of this relic. They have a website which is kofc.org. So it stands for Knights of Columbus, of course. But kofc.org/Vianney. And Vianney is spelled V-I-A-N-N-E-Y. There's also an email they can email to, which is vianney@kofc.org. That's a great thing. And we're obviously, in a time where people are very, very hurt, very angry, and dealing with all sorts of other emotions about the crisis we've got regarding priests and the bishops. We need to help to turn to Jesus. And that's exactly what Saint Jean Vianney did. And he was the greatest confessor in our history. So we need him to help pray for us so that priests and bishops repent of bad and turn to good and become sharers of good.
He's an excellent exemplar. This heart was full of love for the people of God.
Yeah.
And as you say, he would spend 14 hours a day or more in the confessional, helping people to root out sin from their life and to live holy lives.
And we want to pray that he helped to do that for all of the clergy today, that we can be as good as he was. Well, thank you, Peter, for bringing this with us. And I know you're going to be taking this over to the cathedral here in Birmingham.
Yes.
And it'll be on pilgrimage there as well as other cities. So check that out. And we are going to be back in just a couple of minutes with tonight's guest, Father Robert Altier. So please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome back. So we have a guest tonight, and he is a priest of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. He is serving at the Church of St. Raphael in Crystal, Minnesota, and he also presents an expansive video series on EWTN called Beauty, Truth, Goodness, the Fundamentals of Catholicism. Now, this series was designed to help Catholics better understand and live and defend their faith. So, to tell us more about it, please welcome Father Robert Altier.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good to have you here. Good to be here. I apologize that you're here in the sunny South, and it is sunny today, but it's kind of cold. Maybe not as cold as Minnesota, but it's not the warmth you might have been expecting.
Well, actually, I'm one of those weirdos that likes it cold. And so I was happy last night when I came in, it was 40 degrees.
Yes,
praise
okay,
the
well,
Lord.
good.
Felt like spring to me.
Yeah. Well, it's winter here.
It's supposed to be 2 when I get home, so.
That's cold. Well, to warm our hearts up with God's truth, you have this new series. And how is it that you got involved in doing this series in the first place?
Well, it actually started out 29 years ago when I was first ordained. The pastor had asked me to teach a series of classes in the parish. Mm-hmm. And so I put those together as a series that would be 12 weeks, but 2 hours at a time. And then eventually, as things go, you just keep adding more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And over time, they became quite popular. I taught them twice a year, so we had about 150 people a year who were taking the classes. Mm-hmm. And about 200 people have been converted to the faith through taking those classes. So the people at Catholic Parents Online eventually asked if they could videotape it and make it available to more people, because it's pretty comprehensive, and it presents the faith in a way that's a little different. That's same truth, but just coming at it from a little different angle. And
when you say that you take it from a different angle, what is this angle that you are trying to take?
Well, first of all, my philosophy was that you could no longer tell people this is just what the church teaches, mm-hmm. because you had to. People want to know, they want to understand, and so part of it is
that's part of having a rational mind.
Exactly.
You want to understand.
Exactly. But for many years, people were okay saying this is what the church teaches. They accepted that, and that was fine. But now we live in this time where people doubt and they question and so on. So my thought was, let's explain it. So here's what the church teaches, here's why. And more importantly, where it can, here's how it applies to you. Mm-hmm. And so it's coming at it from a very practical perspective. One of the things, I guess, I'm not particularly smart, so I can talk to average people at an average person's level, and so it's presenting things to people on their day-to-day level. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes it accessible to people. That's probably what's made it as popular as it is.
Well, so how is it that you approach? What are the ways that make this so distinctive in how you approach presenting the content of our faith? Because our faith is not just a vague believing, it has specific content.
Correct.
And especially, how does this relate to beauty, truth, and goodness? What have you got going here?
Well, the way that I approach it, some of it is asking questions, to have people think for a minute, and then I'll give them the answer. Mm-hmm. And some of it I have to say I do on purpose. It's a little bit, I ask them, for instance, when we talk about Jesus, and okay, how many would say that Jesus is, for instance, a human person with a human nature? The vast majority of people raise their hand, and I say, congratulations, you're all a bunch of heretics. Mm-hmm. And then I say, no, that's the Arian heresy, and here's the problem with that, and here's why. So he's not that. So how many of you would say that he is God? with a divine nature. And of course, then they raise their hand. I say, well, you're still a bunch of heretics, and here's why. This is monotheism.
You're just a trickster.
Well, but then we'll all eventually come to the truth. Unfortunately, by the time I get to the truth, after going through Nestorianism as well, nobody will raise their hand when I say, okay, is Jesus a divine person with two natures, human and divine? Nobody will raise their hand because I've called them heretics 3 times by then. But it's trying to present in a way that they can remember it.
Yeah,
And so, but then it's a lot of information. Somebody once said to me, you should cover half the information in twice as much time. And I said, but then we're only going to cover 1/4 of the information. You know, the idea is, especially if it's taped, people can come back and listen to it. They can look at it again, and they can get more out of it. Because over the years, people have told me, well, I'm thinking about the point you made, and by the time I kind of come back in, you're 2 points ahead. And I missed all that. And so they would either come back, take the class again, or they get the tapes or whatever. And I guess I'm dating myself talking about tapes, but now it's whatever.
Yes, you are.
DVDs or whatever they are. But
it's been a time of rapid change, so we'll accept it.
There we go.
I still talk about records.
we're getting to be old.
Yes.
So anyway, it's trying to present the beauty. So it's the truth, obviously. We want the fullness of the truth, and that's the comprehensive part. I mean, right now, it's presented in 60 30-minute programs. That's what EWTN is playing. And so it goes from starting with God and creation and ending, of course, with eschatology or the end times things, and then everything in between. So it's trying to get the basics. It doesn't go, obviously real deep, but it's to try and say, here's what we believe. What I always told the people that are converting, I said, look, I want to make sure that you know what you're converting to. I don't want anybody to say, if I would have known that, I wouldn't have become Catholic. And so I said, we won't get into the fine details about everything, but I said, we're going to cover everything that's necessary that you can to know. And so it's comprehensive, but it is clear. And that's the thing that I think is it's clear, but it's accessible.
And this is an important quality because we've certainly been in a period of time where lack of clarity was even presented as a virtue. You and I are old enough to remember that in the 60s and 70s, where being unsure of what the church really believes and unsure about what you believe was considered a way to keep you uncomfortable and struggling with personal freedom and choice. And instead of saying, let's get some clarity about what we do believe and why. That's what you're trying to do.
That's what I'm trying to do. Jesus said the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And the confusion, which comes from the vagueness, basically says I can make my own truth.
Yeah.
I have a different truth than you do. It's like, no, the truth is objective. It's not my own opinion. And that was part of the problem, is that people don't know what the truth is. They're made for the truth, but they didn't know what it was because it wasn't being taught. And so that was part of what I was setting out to do.
Well, there's a very important line in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 14, where it says, St. Paul wrote, God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. And that's where he set the contrast between confusion and peace. And he was warning the Christians in Corinth not to live in a confused way about their doctrine on a variety of ways, because they were dividing into little factions. In the use of the spiritual gifts, don't cause confusion. Confusion is from the enemy of our soul, and peace is what God gives us.
And the peace will come from having the truth. If you're clear, you can be at peace. And the beautiful thing about being Catholic is that it's not my opinion. Because somebody can challenge my opinion and then maybe I'm not sure. It's objective. It's the same for everybody in every country, every culture, every age. The truth doesn't change. And when I can conform myself to the truth, even if somebody's going to try to deny it or challenge it, I know it's not just my opinion. And so therefore, it's not a personal attack, and it's not causing me to doubt the truth then, because the truth is objective.
And again, that's another element of what we've seen in our own lifetimes, that sometimes theologians are so emphasizing their opinion as a way for them to be creative and come up with something new. And that's not what we want. Like in a math class, you don't want creative new answers that are wrong. Perhaps creative, but I don't consider it creative. When I go to a store, I want my change to be given to me correctly. I don't want too little or too much. I want the exact correct change. And I don't want creative, well, I think that you should take only $2 out of the $5 we owe you in change. No, that's not good. I want the correct. And the same in my faith, because much more is at stake in the faith.
Absolutely.
Eternal salvation is at stake.
Well, and you know, the point is that we can be creative in the way that we present it, but it has to be the truth. You know, you think, you know, the Trinity. St. Patrick used the shamrock when he went to Ireland. It was what was there. That hadn't been used before. And so, fine, it's the same truth. It's a different way of presenting it, and it made sense to the people. But you can't come up with a new truth.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Right.
And that's, with all the different things, you know, the people were trying to make a name for themselves more than, you know, if they came up with a new theory. You especially see that in the scripture world. You know, all these people that were just coming up with something new so that they might be the shining star. And it's like, no, be a servant of the word.
There's also an element, they're coming up with something new so they have a dissertation topic so they can get their PhD and tenure. That's another issue.
Yeah, so in this, it's just simple. You know, here's what the church teaches, here's why the church teaches it, here's how it can apply to your life. That's what we try to do. And
well, in terms of the element, how does beauty, I like the point that Bishop Robert Barron makes, that today much of our apologetics needs to include the element of beauty in the church. And this is very important because oftentimes many of our churches are not particularly beautiful. You know, they might have some clever architecture, but not necessarily beautiful architecture or art. How does beauty come into play? Because it's part of what you're doing. How does it factor in?
well, in two ways in these videos. That one, of course, the truth is beautiful. And when we can see being made in the image and likeness of God, and that the truth will set us free, that's the greatest beauty of it all. But in the videos, there's a lot of what they would call B-roll that's put in there, you know, pictures and art and other things to be able, again, to highlight the point artistically and beautifully. Yes. And so it's, in that way, again, it's bringing it very practically to people. And of course, with some of the art in the church and the beauty in the church, remember, for instance, with stained glass, that was originally for people who couldn't read. And so it told the stories. They could come and they can see it, and it would remind them of what they were hearing in the scriptures, and because they couldn't read them. So we can do that same thing. You know, picture, as they say, speaks 1,000 words. And so if we can be speaking the word and have the picture there for people's minds, it's approaching them in two different senses, the sight and the hearing, and so it can go deeper into their hearts.
Yeah, Raymond Arroyo last week had a wonderful guest on his program that was addressing the need for more beautiful art as a way to teach the truths of the faith, to illustrate the truths of the faith. She had a book that was talking about how that was very important at the time of the Reformation, when the reformers were destroying art in the churches. They were iconoclastic, especially in Holland and Belgium. You had Catholic artists coming up with Baroque and other beautiful pieces of art that taught, and the art illustrates, but also elevates us to beauty, along with the truth.
Right.
That's how that works together.
And really, again, because the truth itself is so beautiful, the expression of it, really, if it's the expression of truth, can only be beautiful. If there's something that's twisted, it suggests that what it's expressing is twisted.
Yeah.
And so the truth is clear. There's no confusion. There's no twisting. And so that's the way the art ought to be, and it ought to reflect the Creator, who is the truth.
This is, I think, a very important component. And it's one of the reasons why we also want to encourage Catholics to become involved in the arts, whether it's music or literature or painting or glass or all the different theater, movies, the media that bring beauty to the internet. There's a lot of ugliness and sin that's promoted on the internet. We want to promote virtue, beauty, and goodness. That's part of our role in elevating the culture from its downward spin.
And that's the thing, as Catholics, we have something that not only just as the Lord would use in his parables, like the yeast and the dough and such, that's what we're to be in the society, to lift it up, and we have something that can do that. But again, if we don't know what the truth is, if we're confused about the truth, if we're vague about the truth, if we're rationalizing our way around the truth, then we can't present it.
Yeah.
So somebody who's looking at art has to know the truth first.
When you come across people who, as you described, are rationalizing themselves away from the truth. In other words, they're using a number of arguments and propositions and ideas to move themselves away from the truth, which is an odd use of reason. But why would they do that? What motivates people to use their reason to deny truth?
Oftentimes, it's an attempt to justify sin, or to justify why they shouldn't have to do or accept whatever to conform themselves to the truth. If they've accepted something that's not true, and you look at what the devil does. Right from the garden, it's taking what God says and twisting it again, and so if we look in our society, which is very not only rationalistic, but it's the relativism that's there, and so now to say that, look, this is the truth that we have to conform ourselves to, people take that almost as an insult or something that's a violation of their dignity. I can make up my own mind about what's true. And, well, okay, we have our mind that we can make up, but let's at least explore the truth. But it's that point of conforming to something else. They all want to be unique, independent, whatever, which God made us all unique, but he made us in his image and likeness. And God is truth, and God is love. And so the truth and the love is what he wants for us. And when we use our reason, when we use our free will against that, that's what violates our own dignity. And so again, what the devil's doing is say, this is what will make you free. And in fact, it's what enslaves us.
Yeah, the evil one in the garden had said, did God really say that you shouldn't eat from any of the fruits? No, we can eat everything except one, and lest we die. And then, that the brilliance of the temptation is this, oh, you won't die. Now, there's another part of that sentence. you won't die right away. You know, just like someone who picks up a habit like using drugs. You don't die usually the first time you use them, first time you smoke, first time you drink. Usually you don't die from that. But when you develop it to a conclusion, then
You can.
So there's this deception. And a lot of people help them. They don't even need the devil to come up with bad reasons. They work on their own.
Yeah.
You know,
And I'm right in a society like ours, there are plenty of them out there for people to choose from.
Right.
Which is again why we have to get the truth out there. You know, there's so many competing voices and all the talking heads on TV and or the internet or whatever these days. If we don't get the truth out there, people aren't going to hear it.
One other element, though, that we also, I mentioned it when we had the relics of Saint Jean Vianney here. Again, he needed to take it over to the cathedral, and we're having a service tomorrow with the priests of the diocese at the cathedral with the heart of Saint Jean Vianney. But a lot of people also think, oh, wait a minute. What about all these priests that have been doing all these abusive things? They're not living this stuff. They don't even believe it. Why should I?
Well, again,
What do you say to that?
once again, the truth is objective, and even if somebody else isn't living it, doesn't give me the right to not live it or the excuse to not live it. If I know what the truth is, I have to embrace that. I have to conform myself to it. And what we have to be careful of, and we see this all the time, especially with some of the troubles that the bishops have run into, it's the Catholic Church. It's like, no, those are individuals in the church.
Who are not living
The
the
truth.
Catholic faith.
Correct.
And, because they fail to live the truth of the faith, doesn't make it any less true.
Exactly.
And it doesn't give me an excuse to not live it. As a matter of fact, I usually say that if these folks, these bishops and priests commit these sins, and then because they are scandalous, then I say, well, then I'm not going to live it either. At that point, the devil gets a 2-for-1 sale.
Exactly.
He tempts the one group of people to commit their sins, and then I get caught up in it too, so then he gets a 2-for-1.
Exactly.
And being the son of a used car salesman, I understand twofers. You don't want to go with that.
No, and I pointed out to people, I said, if you put yourself in the devil's position, why go after thousands of people when you can just go after one?
Yeah.
Get the priest or get the bishop. And if he's going to not preach the truth, if he's going to give bad example, if he's
Yeah, if
going to
he
lead people,
compromises because
Right.
he's compromised his own morals.
and then he's going to teach the people the wrong stuff,
Right.
and then then all the devil had to do was go after one,
That's it.
and he got hundreds or thousands.
So our turn is to do what's right.
Accept the truth and live it.
All right. So this is a series that's called Beauty, Truth, Goodness, the Fundamentals of Catholicism with Father Robert Altier, and it'll be a 12 DV set with 60 programs all told, right?
60 30-minute
So it'll be
programs.
5 shows on each DVD. So this is a good thing. It'll be item 2824D at our catalog, ewtnrc.com. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We're going to come back in a couple of minutes and get your questions and our studio audience as well. So please stay with us. You ready for some questions?
We're ready for questions.
Giddy up. Let's start off with a phone call. Hello, John.
Hello, Father.
How are you?
Oh, good tonight. Yourself?
Full of spit and vinegar. So what
Yeah,
you got
Father
for a
Robert is
question
too,
for
I
us
believe.
tonight?
In a good way. Well, we can regard our religion with a lot of beauty and truth, and heretics were mentioned before, and we just simply have to know that Jesus is God and is fully powerful, able to do anything. And I wanted to ask our guest if he could tell us some of the ways that we can get drawn to Jesus personally so as to be very far from being heretics. And I'll hang up.
Thank you, John. So how do we, get closer to Christ and thereby avoid becoming part of heresy?
Well, first of all, of course, read the Gospels. That's where we come to know Jesus personally in that way. But it's
And
primarily...
especially in your prayer life.
That's what I was going to say, especially in prayer. Because we can read the catechism, we can even read the scriptures, we can know about Jesus. But we want to know Jesus. And that is only going to happen in prayer. To know somebody requires a relationship, not just reading about them. And so we want to make sure that we're conformed to the truth. But if we're praying, truly praying, we will ultimately be conformed to the truth, because if there's something in the way, God will let us know that. If we're humble enough to be willing to say that I might not have the truth, or I might be mistaken on this, let me look it up, let me ask somebody, and so that we can make sure that we are conformed to the truth. So again, right now, there are lots of opinions about who Jesus is. And so, as he said, yes, Jesus is God, but Jesus is a nice guy. Jesus is a teacher. Jesus is whatever. They've got, the warm, fuzzy Jesus, as I call him. And it's like, it's not the truth. We want the truth about the person of Jesus because he is the truth. And so there's no falsehood in him. So again, if we truly want to know Jesus, we have to be willing to conform ourselves to the truth, which is what the prayer life is about, conformity to Christ.
Yeah, and it's good to use the scriptures in your prayer. I especially recommend that people make or take time before the Blessed Sacrament if they possibly can. So you're looking at the Word of God, telling us about Jesus in front of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, and engage him as a friend to a friend. That would be a very important part of learning to pray.
Exactly.
Sir, where are you from?
Colville, Washington.
Good to have you here. Welcome. And your question?
Regarding St. John Vianney and the practice of the sacrament of confession, in our parish we've seen, I believe, some increase in that sacrament, partially maybe due to the practice of Eucharistic adoration being promoted. However, to think of the St. John Vianney doing this for 12 to 14 hours, how can we how can we go back to that tremendous participation in the sacrament today?
Well,
Great.
first of all, we have to remember that, St. John Vianney was obviously an extraordinary individual. People would come from Paris to go to confession to him. There were lots of priests in Paris, but they would go to ours because he was such an extraordinary confessor. So on one hand, his situation is slightly different in that way because of who he was. But the question is a very valid one. For a number of years, we were dealing with problems with general absolution, and confession was not being encouraged. In some parishes, you had to make appointments to go to confession, which of course takes away the anonymity. There were very limited. I know parishes where there are a couple of thousand people in the parish, and confessions are for 15 minutes a week. And so, if we don't spend the time in the confessional, nobody's going to come. And so we have to be generous. We have to, as priests, we have to make ourselves available. We also have to preach it. And we have to be going to confession ourselves and understand the beauty of it so that we can tell people how beautiful it is and the freedom that comes from confession. And once people can experience that themselves, then they will start telling people about it as well. And so I think, but it has to start at that point with the priests, living it, preaching it, and helping people to understand it. This is not a negative thing. I always point out, people think 6 sacraments are great, but the 7th one they think just is a bad thing. It's like, no, this is so beautiful. If people would only understand, it's not a condemnation. This is God's way of reconciling us with himself, removing the sins from our soul, destroying them, making us pure, drawing us closer to himself. It's so beautiful. And if people would know that, they would be attracted to it.
And I think it's important to remind ourselves that when St. John Vianney was ordained, people were not going to confession in his day either. He was used by the Lord to revive confession. And as you say, they came from Paris. They had to run a special train. This is a dead-end town. There was no train. They had to develop a train line to ours because so many people were coming to confession. So that was important. We have another caller. Hello, Joan.
Hi, Father. How are you? Father
Fine,
Patrick
thanks.
And Father McAleer. You know what? I'm just going to put the cards on the table here, Father McAleer, with you. We do a Eucharistic Vigil here for the Holiness of Priest in New York for a number of years. And you know what surprises me is that we don't have enough exorcist priests, you know, because the devil is rampant. And a lot of priests, I've spoken to a lot of priests here in New York and around the world, to be honest with you. I won't name names, but they're very nonchalant, and I don't know what it is, but they're like lackadaisy and think everything is okay, don't worry about it. But the devil is rampant, and we need more exorcists and more priests to do exorcism course, number one. And number two, we need the priests to be talking from the pulpit how they can protect the lay people and do healing and deliverance.
Okay.
Well, a couple of things. Thankfully, the bishops of the United States back a few years ago started a course for priests to be trained as exorcists. We can't just throw any priest out there and say, just do this. They're going to get hurt badly if they don't know what they're doing. So
right.
it's a 2-year course. Each time that it's been taught now, it's full. So 60 priests from around the country each time taking this. And so we're getting more and more, but we're still way behind. We have to realize 25 years ago, we had 1 exorcist in the United States that was active. Now we have several hundred, but we still have a long way to go. We do need to tell people about what's going on. Obviously, we don't want to give the devil more than what is his due, but the main thing that we have to help people to understand is really stay out of mortal sin. That's where the devil's getting people to trip up all the time, and people are you know, again, rationalizing why it's okay for them to do this and so on. And so we have to teach them to keep them out of the way of the devil. To, you know, so again, help them know things. Again, I get frustrated when priests are willing to tell people that things like tarot cards and palm reading and so on are okay. No, they're not. They're mortal sins. No. And so we need to be clear that these occult things we need to stay away from. They're children's games like Magic 8 Ball or Ouija boards, and you know, light as a feather, stiff as a board, Bloody Mary, those kinds of things that school kids play. They're evil. They're opening themselves up, and they don't realize it. They think it's funny or it's fun or whatever. And witchcraft right now is running rampant in America, and so that again is a major problem because people are looking for power, and that's, you know, the devil's going to be willing to give them that if that's what they want. But so we need to have priests that are making sure people are hearing that these other things are bad, stay away from them. But I agree, we need to have healing, we need to have deliverance, we need exorcisms for people who need them. But we have to have priests that are properly trained to do that, and that's where we're lacking. But it is picking up.
And not only properly trained, but they also have to have the approval of the local ordinary, the local
Correct.
bishop. They can't
can't do
put
this
out
on their
a
own.
shingle saying exorcist here. No, this is something that has to be done in good order, because the evil one uses disorder, as we were talking about
Exactly.
before. And I think one way for people to keep in mind that they should think about this, when you start going into the realms of sin, whether it be the occult, like you were talking about, pornography, and a variety of other areas, you are like a soldier who has gone over the enemy's lines. And if you get behind the enemy's lines, you are susceptible of all kinds of harm from the enemy.
That's correct.
You stay away from that which belongs to the enemy of our soul, and stay on, with the means of grace, the means of goodness, beauty, and holiness and truth. That's our defense. So that's why, and again, I urge people, read Ephesians chapter 6 and see the defense we need to have. Sir, where are you from?
Shorewood, Illinois.
Good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
And your question?
Looking to the future, what can be done at the seminary level to help bring healing to this crisis?
Yeah, the sexual crisis that we have. Yeah.
Well, it's a great question. First of all, I think we have to recognize that in the face of this crisis, God is still raising up some wonderful vocations.
Yes.
Lots of young men entering the seminary. They want to be good priests. They want to be holy priests. So again, we need to make sure that they're taught the truth, but we need to form them in their humanness. I remember somebody that I was talking to had gone to a seminary, and they said, well, the rector said, our task is to form you to be men so that you can be priests. And so that was, I thought, a beautiful thing, because if we understand truly what it is to be a man in Christ, then the morality part becomes not so much of an issue. But if we don't know what it means to be men, then we're susceptible again. We need that formation in the truth. We need the formation in morality. And so that's what we need to make sure. And thankfully, the seminaries have been improving over the last decade or two. And so things are moving the right direction.
And I think in terms of the present crisis, what is coming out at this point is that a number of people who had positions of power and authority inside the church abused that authority and that power, either to remove people that disagreed with them in theology, and not disagreed with the church necessarily, but just disagreed with them and their interpretations. And some of them used their authority to induce these young men to commit sin with them. And at this point, we also have to let any young man know, you do not have to ever give into that and be a whistleblower against anybody who abuses their authority to try to abuse you in any way, whether theologically, ideologically, or in other ways, in terms of the flesh. So this is something we have to be very clear. But also, I think when you went to seminary, they had a psychological test, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the same when I went. But we may have to ask new sets of questions because this other crisis has come up, and try to address that on those terms as well.
And the other thing that needs to be there for the seminarians with what you're talking about is that they have to have a way that they know that they can bring that up and be safe.
Exactly.
Because most of them would say, but if I say something, they're going to kick me out of the seminary. If I
That's
want to
right.
be a priest, I have to be silent. And so we have to have something in place that will protect them.
And that's not just a false, the fear on their part.
Oh, no.
That's
no.
happened.
It has.
And, and it's a grave evil. Grave evil.
But again, that was the people in power that were abusing their power.
That's right. That's when instead of good shepherds, they were thieves or hirelings. The good shepherd, Jesus our Lord, won't like that. We have another caller. Hello, Deb.
Hello, Father. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Rhode Island.
Great. And what is your question?
Well, I have a question and a comment, and I want to thank Father for developing the series. I think it's so much needed explanation of why the church teaches what it teaches. But also, in addition to that, I'm just wondering if in these series it's also emphasized that the church cannot officially teach anything other than what Jesus wants the church to teach. When I was growing up in the 60s and I was told, different things about what the church teaches, and some of it was not correct or was not explained. And I thought, well, I can't imagine Jesus ever wanting, nobody but Catholics can get into heaven. That didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, well, the church just makes up its own stuff or something. And so many years later, I came to realize that, the dots get connected by what Jesus wants the church to teach. And I just wondered, I think sometimes a lot of people may have that, that block of the church is making up the rules as they go along, and what does Jesus say about it? So
As a matter of fact, that's what you're talking about, and we've both been talking about it. Some people were making it up as they went along.
They were, and in those classes, as she brings up, what I tell the people right from the start is two things. First, we talked about the vagueness. I said, we are going to make distinctions. And so all through the class, we're making distinctions. And then I tell them the other thing is, when there's something that's my opinion, I'll tell you this is my opinion.
Right.
And, so for instance, when it comes to how often to go to confession, I'll give them my opinion. I'll tell them what the church teaches and make that very clear so that they know that, okay, this is his opinion, and it's just that. But you're absolutely right. We have to teach the truth, and the truth is Jesus Christ. And so the church, there are obviously man-made rules that are there, laws in the church that can change with time and so on. But again, those things are clear for everybody. And so it's not just my opinion about what the way ought to be. There are official teachings in that regard as well. And so that's what we have to be clear about.
And the issue that she brought up, that somebody had taught her that only Catholics go to heaven. I remember back in '58, it had actually been taught earlier than that, but I remember hearing it from the pulpit back in '58 that there was a group saying that only Catholics go to heaven, nobody else does. And Pope Pius XII condemned that and excommunicated the teacher of that.
That was 1949.
49 when he was excommunicated. He later reconciled, but to the church. But still, there was a reminder of that. That wasn't Catholic teaching. They were making that up.
Exactly.
And making it up can be by people on the far left and people on the far right. We're to go straight with the truth and not veer off as Moses warned the people of Israel. Another question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
Wake Forest, North Carolina.
Aren't you something? And so what is your question?
My question tonight is, maybe you could speak to a little bit more about this, Father. Last segment you brought up compromise. With a number of people not living the truth today, being compromised, what kind of impact does that have on society and the church?
Well, it has a huge impact, actually. You think again about what's going on in society right now, and particularly the point that Pope Benedict would bring up over and over and over again, and that is, again, the rationalization and everybody doing their own thing and so on. And so that's where the problem is. If we have to understand, what I always tell people is, look, if you have the truth and somebody else doesn't, if they compromise, they still don't have the truth. But if you compromise, you no longer have the truth. And so once we start compromising, then everything starts spiraling downward, because again, if I don't have to believe this, then what else don't I have to believe? And then nothing is absolute then. And so that's, again, the society that we're living in. Everybody can be their own little God. Everybody can make up their own rules. Everybody can make up their own truth. That's all part of the fruit of the compromise in one way or the other. So again, we need to get back to the truth, because the truth will set us free.
If you think of it this way, going back to an earlier image, somebody who compromises the truth about the way that they handle money at a bank is called an embezzler.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to be an embezzler? Because you're going to get caught. They almost always do. And do you want to be the victim of an embezzler? Well, when people compromise the truth of of Christ's truth and His gospel, these are embezzlers of our immortal souls, and that's what we don't want.
Yeah,
we want to make sure that it's the full truth and that we have a full accounting, because you can't fool Christ on that. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And want to remind people that it's called Beauty, Truth, Goodness, the Fundamentals of Catholicism with Father Robert Altier. It's a 12 DVD set available at EWTNRC.com. And we'll be having this available on EWTN as well. So would you join me in giving a blessing to our audience?
Absolutely.
We've run out of time. Lord bless you all and keep you, and especially tomorrow on the Feast of St. Nicholas, give you great joy and blessing and generosity. Almighty God bless you, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, we can bring Father Altier and his series and all the other programs that we do only because this network is brought to you by you. Some mother was inspired to start it. So please keep us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill, and we'll pay our bills too. Thank you.